Hello, beautiful light beings. Shannon O'Flaherty here. For those of you who are new to Heart-Centered Freedom, I'm so glad that you've joined the group. It's lovely to see you here and welcome. So today I'd like to speak to you all about tuning into your birth story, because it can be a very revealing thing about yourself. It's where we get some of our fundamental belief systems. Most of us, hi Adrian, most of us have a birth story. Even if your birth story was that you were adopted and you don't know who your birth parents are, that's still your birth story, that you were given up. So that can tell you a lot of things about yourself. Maybe your parents never spoke about your birth story, and that in itself is a birth story. Why did they never talk about you being born, and what did you take from that? How did you perceive that information? And if you don't remember or ever speaking to your parents about your own birth story, there's plenty of us in here who are mothers and gave birth, and we have a birth story about how our babies were born and what was the story that we told our children also, because sometimes in birthing a baby, you can heal a lot of your own kind of birth issues when you were born. Okay, raised in foster care. Yeah, so you're going to have a lot of belief systems around, not being wanted or not being important enough. I don't know what the direct vein would be until I spoke to you, but there's the way that children perceive things by what our parents say, and what they don't say can be huge in our self-development. So I want to tell you about my birth story, because it was an interesting one, and I remember the day when I found out about my birth story. I was 11 years old, and my mother. It was a weird day because my mother was sitting in my bedroom. Actually, there was a typewriter in my bedroom, and she had these long nails, and she was typing like old-fashioned typewriter. Yes, I'm that old. Typing. And I thought that's a bizarre thing because it was something my mother doesn't do. And she was typing slowly, the little white-out thing. And I had just been to Florida to visit my grandmother on my dad's side. And one of her sisters, who we referred to as Aunt Booty. I don't know what I had said about Aunt Booty, but I said something. I was standing in the doorway of my room looking at my mother, and I made a comment about Aunt Booty. Perhaps not a very nice comment. I don't actually remember the comment, but I said something, and my mother looked up and venomously spat out, "Don't you ever say anything negative about your Aunt Booty." And I was like, whoa, what, why, what's your deal? Because my mother was so defensive and so protective of this woman. And I said, well, why? And she said, "You wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for your Aunt Booty." My mother was still kind of angry. She was kind of angry, generally. And I was like, what do you mean? And I stood leaning against the door frame, and my mother said, she finally told me my birth story. And she said that when she was pregnant with me, she'd just been to have an examination and was wearing a white pleated skirt. This is 1962, I was born. Okay. White pleated skirt, and she was walking down the street, and a woman came up behind her and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you pregnant?" And my mother turned around, because she was only 3 months pregnant, and saw a trail of blood down the pavement, and thought, uh-oh, and turned around and went back to the doctor. And the doctor immediately turned her upside down and advised her to abort this baby and try again. And my mother said, no, I don't want to abort this baby. I want this baby. And he said, well, from having your previous baby, your uterus got tipped, and this baby isn't going to stay inside unless you stay in bed for the rest of your pregnancy and stand on your head every hour on the hour to tip your uterus back in place. And I stood there, 11 years old, like, what? And my mom said, I had your sister, who, my sister's only 19 months older than I am. So she was maybe, just over a year, a little baby. And she thought, I can't stay in bed with a baby. And so Aunt Booty, my great aunt, I guess my grandmother's sister, great aunt, came to live with them. And she took care of my mother and my sister so that my mother could stay in bed and stand on her head every hour on the hour to tip her uterus back into place. And I'm 11 years old, crying. I'm hearing this story and crying. And I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty that I had caused my mother such pain. And at the same time, without really understanding it all at that age, it explained so much to me about my relationship with my mother, because it was always so like tiptoeing around on thin ice around my mother. Like I could upset that woman just by being, it felt like to me when I was a child. And I never quite understood that. And I thought, wow, so she was in bed all the time with my sister. And then I invented a lot of beliefs around my sister. And I think I even said to my mother, like, oh, so maybe Kelly wasn't happy then when I was born. And Mom said, actually, it was a great time with me and Kelly, because I just laid in bed with my baby and read books together. And I thought, oh, wow, well, that explains a lot about my sister, because she always had her head in a book. Still does. Yeah. She's a research biologist. So she's a major bookworm. And I felt really jealous when my mother, in the same breath with venom, telling me how difficult it was just to keep me and give birth to me, and yet how she just loved hanging out with my sister in bed. So I felt guilty. I felt upset that I had caused my mother such pain. And then I felt really jealous that she was happy and loved spending all of that time with my sister, and that the pressure was off of her to do the work. Hey, Kimmy. And I remember just feeling like so upset, and at the same time, without understanding it, really understanding at a kind of more energetic level how that affected my relationship with my mother. And then she said, when I was finally ready to come out 2 weeks later than my due date, she spewed this whole story, not out with love. She spewed it at me because she was angry that I had said something against Aunt Booty when I didn't really understand it. So I was like, 11. Hey, Robin. And so she said, then when you were ready to come out, you weren't going to waste any time, you little impatient child. She always called me impatient. So I wonder where I get that from, huh? And so she said I decided to just come plowing out of her. And she was in the hospital, and they didn't believe her that she was giving birth until she said, yeah, I just did this 19 months ago. The kid's head is coming out. So they shoved her on a stretcher, and as my mother was being rolled down the hallway on the way to delivery, I came out. Only a nurse panicked and tried to hold me in while I was being born. Okay, now, I don't remember that, of course, but my mother was telling me this whole story. And when she was telling me this, I thought, oh God, that too, without really understanding it all at 11 years old, made some kind of sense to me. And I was standing there in the doorway crying my eyes out. Did my mother come over and embrace me and hold me and soothe me and say, it's okay, darling, because you're here and you're healthy and I'm so happy I had this lovely baby? No, she was spewing this story out to me with venom. So I had all of these feelings going on. And then she said, and you know, you were like almost 10 pounds being born, my poor little mother. And she said, because this nurse held you in, you swallowed all of this stuff and were really, really sick. And I was put in an incubator and not held for the first 2 days of my life. Actually, I don't think I heard that part of the story until I was 37. That was like the second part of the story. And I didn't know that I hadn't been held for the first 2 days of my life, which made sense to me about all of the being cold all the time and always wanting arms around me and blah, blah, blah. Because the baby, okay, me, the baby, was trapped inside my mother. Okay, now trapped was one of the words that I used once when I asked my mother. I wrote a sentence about how my mother was feeling. And it was like something like trapped and I don't remember now, frustrated and out of control or something. And before telling her the sentence that I wrote down, this was later on when I was 37, when I started studying transactional analysis. She happened to be visiting, and I said, Mom, or Mom, actually. Oh, I've lived in England too long. Mom, give me one sentence about how you felt when you were pregnant. And she said, word for word, the exact sentence I had written down. And I was like, what? Oh, and then I showed her my sentence and she said, wow, okay, cool. Maybe it was around different things. And then I heard the part 2 of the story that I hadn't been held. So the baby, me, felt trapped inside her because I was ready to leave. I was ready to leave this life, this time, and I couldn't get out. So I was trapped. And then finally, when I'm born, I'm not allowed out, so I'm suppressed. And then when I finally do get out, I don't get to be with my mother. I'm put in a box. And so the baby, me, felt not wanted, trapped in, and then not wanted. Trapped in, not let out, and then when I do come out, not wanted. Even though my mother totally wanted me. She worked really hard to have me. And I was lucky for all of the ways that my parents knew how to love and express love. They did, and they did their best with the information they had at the time and for where they were in their lives at the time. So, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you had the most loving parents or the most horrible parents, because children perceive things in their own way. If you watch the video Dueling with Dual Beliefs, I talk about that. So watch that. So all of those feelings of being born, all of those birth stories, and there's more. There's a third part to this, but I think that's going to have to be another video because that goes into another whole part of this whole thing. I'll talk about that in another time. But your whole birth story can tell you a lot. And even though I was 11 and didn't understand about beliefs and how they form and everything, when I started to really tune in later when I was studying psychotherapy and doing all of the work with my mother, I really learned an awful lot about myself, about feeling trapped, about worrying. I've been a great worrier my whole life. Hi, Wanda. Hi, Sheila. Been a great worrier my whole life. Could invent things to worry about. And because my mother was worried the whole time she was pregnant with me, worried. Will I have this baby? Will I be able to carry the baby to term? Will she be born? I don't know if she knew I was a she. Will she be born? Okay. And then I was born and I was sick for the first 6 months of my life. So they didn't know was I going to be okay? Worry. It's in my cells. Worry trapped, frustrated, you know, all of those things, even though my mother loved me very much and wanted me very much, I still felt unwanted, trapped, not let out, and then not held. So look back at your own birth story. And if your mother is still alive, talk to your mother and find out what she was feeling. In fact, do that exercise. Tune into your mother when she was pregnant with you, and write down what was she feeling when she was pregnant with me. Write it down, a simple sentence. And then if your mother's alive, talk to her, and before you tell her what you wrote down, ask her, how did she feel? Like in her core of cores, how did she feel when she was pregnant with you? And see if it resonates with what you wrote down, because I'll bet you've picked up a lot about how your mother was feeling. And it might be related to different things. A lot of what I wrote down from my mother was not related to the way that I perceived it. She had different reasons, but nevertheless, the emotions were the same. And then think back to, you know, put yourself back in the position of your mother, put yourself into that position of the baby who is perceiving things, even though it's a baby, so it can't consciously reason. But that's how you pick up these core beliefs from a fundamental point of view. And then you grow into adults and you wonder, why am I freaking out all of the time? Why do I feel so frustrated? Why am I worrying about everything all of the time? Why am I so sad, angry, overwhelmed? You know, whatever it was, a lot of these beliefs come from that. And then you can look at when you gave birth, if you're a mother, what was that birth story? You know, I made sure to change that birth story because I wanted to have an idyllic time, if that is at all possible in childbirth. It was for me. So look back to your time in utero. What was going on for your parents or your mother when you were inside of her? Were they moving around a lot? What was going on? And if you were adopted, find out what you can to find out what your birth story was. And even if you can't find out how you were actually born, I mean, why were you put up for adoption? Because that alone is a big thing to deal with in yourself. And these are belief systems and feelings and emotions that you really need to come to terms with and heal. Okay, so I thought I would just share that with you today and give you some food for thought, because this is the way we heal, by delving deep into our subconscious, by figuring out where all of these beliefs come from. And this is the work I do, along with the energy work, to pull this stuff out of your energy field. Because why? You know, a little bit of understanding goes a long way, but why do we hold on to this stuff when we can clear these beliefs? And then if we're clearing this belief and our energy changes, then we can start attracting a whole different life to ourselves. It's systematic, and it's a systematic approach that I use. So private message me if you want to get rid of these beliefs, if you want to discover what they are and get rid of them, and I will get you the same great results that I've gotten for my clients in the past. I so look forward to working with you. Lots of love to you today, and I'll see you all on the next video.